Pam Bondi walked into that hearing room like she had already won. She sat down, adjusted her notes, and prepared to deliver the performance of her political career. Nobody in that room was going to challenge her. Nobody was going to ask the follow-up questions that actually mattered. Nobody was going to point out that the story she was about to tell had some very serious holes in it, and that's exactly how they planned it. The whole thing was choreographed from the opening question to the final applause. What you saw on your screen was not oversight. It was theater, and the most dangerous kind of theater is the kind that looks like the truth. So let's talk about what actually happened, what was conveniently left out, and why it should matter to every single American, regardless of which party you belong to. Here's the setup you need to understand before we get into the numbers. Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the House Judiciary Committee, and what followed was one of the most carefully orchestrated political performances in recent congressional history. The questions were designed not to seek information, but to generate shareable clips. Short, punchy, damning-sounding statements that would live forever on social media feeds without any surrounding context. And Bondi played her role perfectly, nodding along, agreeing enthusiastically, and at one point even saying that a documented crime statistic drop was absolutely, thanks to the current administration's leadership. The problem is that when you actually look at the data behind those claims, a very different picture starts to emerge. And that picture tells a story this administration desperately does not want you to see. Let's start with the crown jewel of the whole hearing, the claim that the country is now more safe under President Trump. Bondi sat there and confirmed without hesitation that the murder rate had dropped by a historic 20% in 1 year, crediting the current administration's law enforcement strategy. The congressman across from her called it incredible, and the clip spread across conservative media within hours. But here is what that clip did not tell you. The FBI released its official crime data in August of 2025, and yes, the murder rate did fall dramatically. But the data covered the year 2024. The last full year of the Biden administration. Not the first year of the Trump administration. The decline that Bondi stood up in Congress and took credit for had already happened before this administration ever took a single policy action. This is not spin. This is not partisan interpretation. This is the documented timeline of when the data was collected versus when the current administration took office. Axios confirmed it. The Council on Criminal Justice confirmed it. CBS News confirmed it. The violent crime rate had been falling for 2 consecutive years and hit a 20-year low in 2024, a year when the current administration had zero influence over federal law enforcement policy because they were not yet in power. And yet, there sat the Attorney General of the United States, nodding along as a congressman declared the country safer under Trump, with no correction, no clarification, and no asterisk. Just agreement. Now, here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. While Bondi was in that hearing room accepting credit for a crime decline she inherited, her own department had already taken actions that experts say will make future crime worse, not better. The Brennan Center for Justice documented that this administration canceled more than $820 million in federal grants that supported over 550 organizations across 48 states. These were not abstract bureaucratic programs. These were violence interruption initiatives, victim support services, community safety programs, and reentry resources that decades of research have shown actually reduce crime at the neighborhood level. A federal judge reviewing those cuts did not mince words. The judge called the cancellations shameful and said they lacked any legitimate justification. So the administration that is standing in front of Congress bragging about falling crime rates simultaneously gutted the very infrastructure that helped cause those crime rates to fall. And then they turned around and called it leadership. It is a bit like someone inheriting a thriving garden, immediately pulling out half the plants, and then inviting journalists over to photograph how green everything still looks. The crime statistics were just one part of the hearing, though, and the rest of the session followed the exact same pattern. Leading questions, preloaded answers, enthusiastic agreement, no pushback, no follow-up, no accountability. The congressman ran through a list of accusations against the Biden-era Department of Justice, like he was reading from a prepared opposition research file, because he almost certainly was. And Bondi confirmed each one with the energy of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in advance. One of the most notable exchanges involved the claim that the Biden Justice Department spied on Republican members of Congress. Bondi agreed, absolutely, and the clip spread instantly. But here is what that framing left out. CBS News reported that what actually occurred was the legal acquisition of phone records, meaning call logs showing who contacted whom during a specific 4-day window around January 6th. Not wiretaps, not surveillance, not monitoring of private conversations. Phone records, the same tool law enforcement has used in investigations for decades under established legal protocols. Jack Smith's legal team confirmed the action was entirely lawful and consistent with DOJ policy. And here is the part that exposes the double standard so clearly it should be impossible to ignore. The Justice Department's own internal watchdog, in a December 2024 report covered by NPR, found that during Trump's first term, the administration secretly obtained the phone and text records of 43 congressional staffers, 2 Democratic members of Congress, Representatives Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, and journalists from CNN, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. That investigation produced 0 criminal charges. 0. But when Democrats had their records obtained, it was national security. When Republicans had their call logs reviewed during an investigation into an actual attack on the United States Capitol, suddenly it became spying and weaponization. The standard changed depending entirely on who was being investigated. And that word, weaponization, deserves its own examination because Bondi used it repeatedly throughout the hearing. She positioned herself as the person who came in to end the weaponization of justice, to restore the rule of law, to put the Department of Justice back on the side of the American people. It sounds powerful, it sounds principled, and it might even be believable if you did not know what happened next. NPR reported that last September, the President of the United States posted publicly on social media, directing Bondi by name to prosecute his political enemies. He wrote, and this is not paraphrasing the substance, this is describing what was posted, that justice must be served now, and that there could be no more delays. When asked at her Senate confirmation hearing whether she was the Pam the president was referring to in that post, she answered, "I'm sure I was." The Attorney General of the United States confirmed in a Senate hearing that the president had publicly instructed her, by name on social media, to take prosecutorial action, and she accepted the instruction. What followed was even more revealing. Under her oversight, the Justice Department moved to indict former FBI Director James Comey. But the experienced career prosecutor actually running that investigation concluded there was insufficient evidence to bring charges and declined to proceed. Rather than respect that judgment, the department removed that prosecutor and replaced him with a political appointee who had never prosecuted a criminal case in her entire legal career. A federal court later ruled that appointment was illegal and threw out both the Comey case and the related case against the New York Attorney General. Separate federal grand juries refused to indict the New York Attorney General not once, but twice. So when Bondi says she is ending weaponization, what the record actually shows is a Department of Justice that brought charges the evidence could not support, replaced professionals with loyalists, and watched 2 separate cases collapse in federal court. The structure of the hearing itself is worth pausing on because it tells you something important about how political information is manufactured and distributed in 2025. The congressman from Texas did not ask open-ended questions designed to elicit information. He asked closed, leading preloaded questions designed to generate specific answers that could be extracted from context and distributed as standalone clips. Did the Biden DOJ do this? Yes. Did they do that? Absolutely. Did they fail at this? Yes, at least. Each answer, taken alone, sounds like a devastating indictment. Together, in sequence, they built a narrative portrait of a corrupt prior administration. But the questions were never subjected to scrutiny. The framing was never challenged. The evidence behind each assertion was never examined. And Bondi never once said, "Well, let me give you some context on that." That is not accountability. That is the production of political content using the machinery of congressional oversight as a backdrop. And the people watching those clips on their phones will never see the parts that were left out, because the clips were not designed to inform. They were designed to perform. Crime experts who spoke to CBC News were direct about where the real credit for the crime decline belongs. They pointed to Biden-era investments made through the American Rescue Plan, the COVID recovery legislation that directed billions of dollars into public safety infrastructure, mental health services, and community-based violence prevention programs. As the pandemic's social disruptions receded, and those investments took effect, criminologists had projected exactly this kind of decline. It was not a surprise to researchers. It was not the result of any single administration's first-year policies. It was the delayed payoff of sustained investment in the conditions that produce public safety. And this administration's response to inheriting that declining crime trend was to cancel $820 million worth of the programs driving it. Meanwhile, the institutional damage being done to the Justice Department itself is being documented in real time. The Brennan Center noted that multiple federal judges have begun openly questioning whether the DOJ can be trusted to tell the truth in court, a statement that should stop every reader cold. The department's anti-corruption unit, the division responsible for holding government officials legally accountable, saw 5 of its senior leaders resign rather than follow orders to drop a corruption case. That unit has since been reduced from 36 experienced career attorneys to just 2. More than 70% of the Civil Rights Division's attorneys have departed. A letter signed by over 280 former Justice Department employees stated that the department is no longer upholding the rule of law. So here is what you are actually looking at. You have an attorney general who sat before Congress and accepted credit for a crime decline documented during her predecessor's tenure. You have a Justice Department that gutted $820 million in crime prevention funding while claiming to make the country safer. You have retaliatory indictments that collapsed in federal court. You have a president directing prosecutions via social media post. You have career prosecutors replaced by political loyalists. You have an anti-corruption division hollowed out from within. And you have a congressional hearing designed not to produce accountability, but to produce a highlight reel. None of this is about whether the Biden Justice Department was perfect. It was not, and serious people can have serious criticisms of it. The actual question here is whether you want a Department of Justice that makes decisions based on evidence, legal standards, and the independence that the rule of law requires, or one that takes its cues from what the president posts online before breakfast. The hearing gave you Bondi's answer to that question. She sat in that chair. She agreed with every leading question, and she called it restoring the rule of law. The country is either safer because of evidence-based policy, or it is safer because someone said so in a hearing room while the cameras rolled. Those are 2 very different things, and only one of them will still be true when you actually check the receipts. The receipts in this case are the FBI data, the Brennan Center reports, the federal court rulings, the prosecutor resignations, the grand jury refusals, and the 280 former DOJ employees who signed their names to a letter saying something has gone badly wrong. That is not partisan spin. That is the documented record. And the next time someone shares a clip of Bondi nodding confidently in a congressional hearing, that is the context the clip was specifically designed to make sure you never see.